Sprint Saturday has arrived in eastern Spain as a season-defining spell of 9 races in 12 weeks gets underway in Aragon, close to the picturesque town of Alcañiz, and back for the first time since 2022. Marquez has his rivals' backs against the Aragon wall after powering to a dominant pole. Is another Marquez masterpiece in store at MotorLand. It's time for MotoGP. So the MotorLand Aragon circuit back, as we mentioned, for the first time since 2022. Our first race was here 14 years ago now, back in 2010. The season it won the best Grand Prix of the season. What a memorable debut that was for everybody connected to this MotorLand Aragon circuit. It is fast, it's flowing, it's technical, a little bit of everything packed into its just over 5-kilometre layout. 3.155 miles, 7 right, 10 left. Sector 1 through from turn 1 to turn 6, hard braking into that first corner, down the hill into turn 12, a good overtaking hot spot that through 14 and 15 as well, and then the lap completed by turn 16 and 17. Hard braking into turn 1, turn 12 and turn 16, that offers good overtaking hot spots as well, and then the higher mixed and tyre stress train through those final 2 left-handers. Overtaking hot spots then, plenty of them. This was into 14 and 15, that classic battle 3 years ago with Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia in 14 and 15. 13 days ago in the Styria Mountains of Spielberg, Marc Marquez on the front row of the grid went backwards off the line after a failure to engage his whole shot device. That saw him mount a brilliant recovery from 14th to 4th place. Jorge Martin was the early leader as he looked to wrestle back control of the MotoGP World Championship, but his stay at the front was short-lived. On lap 2, up the hill into turn 1, flew by Pecco Bagnaia. This was part of Marquez's electrifying recovery through the field. He gained 10 places after that first lap disaster. Contact with Jack Miller into the chicane, but it was yet another dream double victory for Pecco Bagnaia as he moved 5 points clear in the MotoGP World Championship. Bagnaia, who took his first MotoGP success here in that epic battle with Marc Marquez back in 2021. Well, he's got it all on to defeat Marquez again here this afternoon, as do the rest of the MotoGP field, because the 8 times world champion, he has dished out a Marquez mauling so far here in MotorLand. Fastest in both free practice sessions yesterday, including a blistering new all-time lap record of a 1:45.801. He topped this morning's tricky conditions in FP2, and then he delivered a truly astonishing lap in Q2 earlier on this morning, a 1:46.766, some way off of his all-time lap record, given the fact that some torrential overnight rain left the track a little bit sketchy this morning. But Marc Marquez on pole position for the second time at Gresini Ducati, his 94th career pole for the number 93, 66 in MotoGP. That doesn't really tell the full story of his domination of this Aragon Grand Prix, because he took that pole position by nearly 8.5 tenths of a second clear of rookie Pedro Acosta. Marquez then, the red-hot, overwhelming favourite for glory in the 11-lap Tissot sprint coming your way in just over 20 minutes' time. Marquez bidding to become the 9th sprint winner. His first sprint success it would be. He's not lacking support here in this part of Spain as well. He's got his own dedicated grandstand, and he comes into the sprint on the back of an incredible record here in Grand Prix. The 31-year-old, 6 wins, 5 in MotoGP, 8 podiums, and now 8 pole positions after that sensational performance this morning. How good was Marc Marquez in Q2? Well, in the last 25 seasons, only 2 full dry MotoGP qualifying sessions has there been a bigger gap between pole and the second qualifier. Shanghai 2007, a gap of just over 8 tenths of a second between Valentino Rossi and John Hopkins, and Valencia 2011, 13 years ago. A gap of over 1 second between Casey Stoner and Danny Pedrosa. Those fans are making a right old racket here in Aragon because they believe they're going to see Marc Marquez take his first sprint success. They believe, they expect him to complete half of a dream double here. Just look at those scenes. There is confirmation on the screens. The biggest gap between pole and second in a MotoGP qualifying in the dry since Valencia back in 2011. It only happened twice previously in the last 25 seasons. It was some lap, some session in Q2 for the Gresini Racing rider. Pedro Acosta second, his first front row start since Cota, just his second of the season. The front row completed by world champion Pecco Bagnaia, but it's a case of catch him if you can as far as Marc Marquez is concerned. Matt Burt, Lewis Sillaby in the commentary box, Simon Crafar down in pit lane. Lewis, we've only just got to emphasise and underline the utter domination of Marc Marquez this morning. He said he needed a perfect weekend to race the GP24s. Perfect Friday, all-time lap record yesterday afternoon, and in somewhat tricky conditions this morning. What a lap, nearly 9/10 of a second clear. He's going to take some shifting from that P1.
He's up against world-class opposition. Multiple world champions in the likes of Pecco Bagnaia, Pedro Acosta, Jorge Martin, of course, a world champion himself and runner-up last season. These are not slow riders, but Marc Marquez made them look it earlier on today to take pole position by a margin such as that. Pedro Acosta's performance also deserves plenty of praise. Out of Q1 to take second place on the grid, way ahead of the other KTMs. But Marc Marquez described them yesterday as his conditions. They're quite similar today after all the rubber was washed off overnight. They're his conditions, it's his adoring public who are watching on. It feels like his sprint to lose. Pecco
Bagnaia, when he came to the fence to speak to Jack Appleyard at the end of his front row, it wasn't a bad qualifying at all for Bagnaia. 47.6 was kind of the reference lap time. Acosta, Bagnaia and Jorge Martin on your screens now, who heads the second row in fourth place. A pretty dramatic start to Q2 this morning for the Prima Pramac Racing rider. He had a pretty heavy crash at turn 5, got back on his spare bike and qualified fourth. Acosta, Bagnaia and Martin all did 47.6s. Quite a rapid pace, fast level. It was just that Marquez just completely moved the goalpost. 7th front row in the last 8 for Bagnaia, who described Marquez's lap time and the gap to the chasing pack to Jack Appleyard this morning as unbelievable. He is doing something different, something rather special on board that GP23 as he goes in search of that first elusive sprint success.
Well, Enea Bastianini could only dream of sprint success. It's been a Saturday horror show so far for the Beast. Of course, all started with his practice performance yesterday, which put him in Q1 to begin with. Some late yellow flags contributed to that, but Bastianini in those rather sketchy conditions this morning. There were still 1 or 2 damp patches when they went out for qualifying 1. As mentioned, it was quite a green track surface. We've already heard this afternoon from the Moto2, Moto3 riders that offline here it is very, very slippery. We've seen quite a few crashes and high sides with riders veering off the racing line. Well, Enea Bastianini's going to have to in this TSO sprint from 14th on the grid. Any faint hopes he still has of being a part of the World Championship conversation surely took a major blow earlier on today. Can he repair the damage this afternoon?
Yeah, the electrifying speed of Marc Marquez, no shock here in Aragon, given his great record. Pecco Bagnaia rapid, no surprise. His first MotoGP success came here in 2021. Jorge Martin, also a proven winning record here in the smaller classes in Aragon. But the big surprise of the weekend so far in terms of our lead quartet, our title contenders, has been the absence at the sharp end of Bastianini. A surprise as well because he's had 6 podiums in the last 8 Grand Prix starts here across all 3 classes here in Aragon. Frankie Morbidelli, pretty solid weekend so far for Fast Frankie on the Prima Pramac Racing machine. 6 he goes at the back of that second row behind Martin and Alex Marquez. Alex Marquez top 5 on the grid in 4 of the last 5, and that's an equal best 6th place on the grid this season for Frankie Morbidelli, a Moto2 and MotoGP winner here previously in Aragon. So maybe Frankie can get himself in that podium fight from the back of row 2.
What may be fresh in Frankie Morbidelli's mind is that, of course, he's about to have to try and get that Ducati GP24 off the start line. The last time he performed a start, he went sideways and almost fell off the side of his Prima Pramac Ducati. So I'm sure Frankie will have got that out of his mind and hope to try and remedy that particular issue as he gets set to launch from the second row of the grid alongside Alex Marquez and Jorge Martin, of course, Morbidelli's teammate, who heads that second row.
5 times in his Gresini Ducati career. Marc Marquez has finished second on Sprint Saturdays. He's probably sick of the sights of a silver medal. He's got it all eyes on gold. Well, his Midas touch has returned here this weekend. He has DNF'd in 3 of the last 4 sprints. I don't think that's going to be anywhere near the forefront of his mind. Of course, you are starting to think in terms of the championship of Marquez as being a bit of an outsider, a bit of a dark horse. Now he slipped 83 points behind Bagnaia at the top of the standings, but this is MotoGP. Never say never, and you certainly will never write off Marc Marquez in the championship. It has been the perfect Friday, the perfect Saturday so far. 11 laps coming your way to see if he can be the 9th rider to win a Tissot Sprint. He would be on cloud 9 if he was able to do so. Just a reminder, he was nearly 8.5 tenths clear of the field at the end of Q2 this morning.
Yeah, one of the things Marc Marquez is so good at, of which there are many, is when track conditions are a little bit unknown, when grip levels are a bit of a mystery, Marc Marquez is just so good at being able to work his way up to the actual limit a lot quicker than anybody else. At one point he was 1.5 seconds clear of the field earlier on today. Of course, that gap in the end was just over 0.8 of a second, but it is going to be a bit of a voyage of discovery for the MotoGP riders in this Tissot Sprint this afternoon. And of course, as mentioned, with it being a little bit dirty and a little bit dusty and certainly not as drippy off the racing line, so important to get that early track position, get out front, get into the lead and force the rest to do the chasing. So Marc Marquez into what is a pretty sketchy first corner here. It's a very tight left-hander and a pretty short dash from the start line into turn 1. The big challenge and the big threat you feel to Marc Marquez winning this sprint will be that first 200 metres or so. What about some of the other stories then outside of Ducati this morning in Q2? Pedro Acosta, as you mentioned, second on the grid, the only non-Ducati inside the top 6. Brad Binder was 7th. Miguel Oliveira on that 3rd row, 8th and 9th for his Trackhouse Racing colleague Raul Fernandez. Superb lap by Acosta. Second he was in a very tricky Q1 session. Second then in Q2. Back on the front row for the first time since round 3. Has he got anything for the brilliance of Marc Marquez? Let's hear from his boss, Nico Goyon, who joins someone down the grid. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Yeah, good afternoon, Nico. So impressive, your young rookie Pedro adapting in such tricky conditions, but also his engineers. I've heard how bikes have had to be adapted to the different changing grip levels. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, well, it wasn't an easy session, but in the end, I think these are the conditions that he likes, where he's performing quite well. We saw it in the free practice this morning. Conditions were tricky, and he was already at the top. So in the end, I think that this extra qualifying session, the Q1, helped him in the final result. In this condition, you have more laps in this condition. You learn the track more than the other one, and I think this is part of the performance in Q2.
And your feeling about the sprint?
Well, starting in front, everything is easier, but bon, I think Marc will be untouchable. Then the rest is open. Let's be close to the podium.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's kind of the sentiment all around the paddock coming into this sprint. Marc Marquez does seem to be untouchable, just on a different league, different level. Pedro Acosta's last podium in 2024 was a 3rd place in the sprint in Mugello. In terms of his Sunday form, it has disappeared somewhat of late. Only one top 6 in 8 since Kota. He's a Moto2 winner here, though, on our last visit back in 2022. Will he have anything for Marc Marquez? Well, the Gresini rider, as we mentioned, just has looked unstoppable, untouchable throughout this weekend. Can he get the job done and win his first sprint? More success potentially beckoning for Gresini Racing on Sprint Saturdays. Well, let's get some thoughts from the boss. Alex Marquez, of course, on the middle of that 2nd row as well in 5th. Michele Massini joins Simon.
Michele, what a weekend from Marc. Also a great weekend so far for Alex. Tell us your expectations.
Yeah, so far a perfect weekend, especially for Marc. So now the crucial will be to make a good start, then manage the first 5 laps, then we see.
Marc's obviously done an amazing job adapting to the different conditions, but you must be proud of your engineers adapting the bike to those conditions as well.
Yeah, exactly, because the grip, the level grip on the track changes quite a bit every practice, and we find always the right setup to adapt to suit better to Marc. Then so I think that we make together a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much to Grazini Racing's Michele Massini. Yeah, 9 podiums so far this season for Marquez. 8 of them have been second places. Here's your grid then for this 11-lap sprint.
Marquez, Acosta, Bagnaia, your front row. Martin off the front row for only the 3rd time this year. He starts 4th from Alex Marquez and Frankie Morbidelli. Brad Binder, Miguel Oliveira and Raul Fernandez on the 3rd row. All 4 Aprilias got into Q2 but got no further. Johan Zarco in Q2 for the first time for a Honda rider this season. He's ahead of the factory Aprilias of Espargaro and Vinales. Bezzecchi, Bastianini and Miller missing out in Q1. They're on the 5th row of the grid. Gian Antonio back from injury. Fabio Quartararo and Taka Nakagami next up. Augusto Fernandez, Luca Marini and Alex Rins on row 7, with Joan Mir completing the field, which all looked, certainly from that brief grid shot, to be running the medium front soft rear combination.
Yeah, Joan Mir's tough time goes on at HRC. His equal lowest qualifying, equal lowest starting position in his MotoGP career, not just over the last 18 months at HRC, as Marquez comes back to the grid. And as he so often does here in Aragon, he gets such a reception, such an ovation. Pecco Bagnaia then on the front row. I'm sure Pecco will be thinking, well, if I don't have a chance of beating Marc Marquez, think bigger picture, just see the checker flag, rack up some more important points for the championship, as Marc Marquez is the overwhelming favourite going into the sprint. Let's get some thoughts from Pecco's team boss, Davide Tardozzi, who's this time.
He is, Davide, some misfortune for Enea, you know, yesterday with the yellow flag, changing conditions today. Pecco seemed to rescue it, him and his team, and on the front row, but Marc's looking like on another level.
Yeah, Marc shows some incredible speed since yesterday morning, while I think that Pedro, Enea, I don't think, but Martin and Pecco can try to fight for the podium. I think the top 4 guys will be, 3 of them will be on the podium, while I think that Marc will make his own race for what he showed. I don't know, we make a slight change after the qualify. We'll see if it helps, but I think that the main issue is the grip of the front tire, because it seems that the consumption is high.
And on the rear, I heard really high temperatures on the soft. Is that a worry at all?
No, for the sprint race is not a big problem. I think that today and mainly tomorrow the front tire will be the issue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks to Ducati boss Davide Tardozzi. Of course, everybody trying to be as upbeat and as optimistic as they possibly can going into this sprint, but everybody already seems kind of resigned to their fate. This is a battle for second place, potentially. Anything can happen. It so often tends to in the MotoGP World Championship, but Marc Marquez is just about as nailed on a favourite as we've had all season so far.
Although, as mentioned, he has not won a Tito sprint before, so he is trying to achieve something that even by Marc Marquez's incredible standards, he has yet to do in MotoGP. Well, the conversation, I'm sure, over lunch at Aprilia would have been, why did it have to rain last night? They looked so good yesterday afternoon in the 1-hour practice session after what was admittedly a very tough morning for Aleix Espargaro, who essentially accepted that the conditions weren't representative or useful, so decided to run tyres he wasn't going to use for the rest of the weekend. But the wet and green racetrack certainly hurt the Aprilias earlier on today. For a word from Aprilia, we can cross straight down to the grid quickly and hear from Paolo Bonora, who joins Simon.
Paolo, just quickly, you had a really tough time in qualifying.
Yeah, very difficult today. The rain of yesterday night destroyed the poor grip of yesterday, and now will be not easy for us. We are checking now also the left side of the grid, and it's fully with no rubber at all, so will be difficult also the launch phase.
Okay, best of luck.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. That's a very good point there by Aprilia boss Paolo Bonora on that left-hand side of the grid, where the bikes don't come across it at any point to clear the dirt, clear the dust. It could be potentially very slick and greasy off the line. A big intake of breath then from world champion Pecco Bagnaia already so far in the opening 11 Grand Prix. He has led for 214 laps. In the whole of last season, he only led for 229. Just gives you an impression of the brilliant season that Bagnaia has had. 7 wins so far, but despite those 7 wins, despite the fact we've had 22 races, he is only 5 points clear of Jorge Martin, who of course will have desires on a 14th sprint win. Whether that will happen when the competition is as fierce as Marc Marquez, well, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, Pecco Bagnaia has been rather feast or famine in the sprints this season. He has had a couple of sprint wins, 3 of them in fact, but he's had quite a few non-scores across them as well. But you could see from the overhead shot, you can get a bit of an idea there of how dirty and dusty it is off the racing line. So the likes of Pecco Bagnaia, Frankie Morbidelli, Ralph Fernandez in particular, who are pit wall side of the grid, they're going to have quite a hard time getting those bikes off the line. The advantage of being on that side of the grid is that you're on the inside line for the first corner, where we do often see incidents into that first corner. If you're on the outside there into turn 1, you could potentially find yourselves in the firing line if someone gets it wrong into turn 1. Pedro Acosta from the middle of that front row will have his eyes for just one thing into that first corner, and that's the lead.
He was strong when he qualified in the front row for the one and only time previously this season in Cota, 4th in the sprint from 2nd, and then he was 2nd in the Grand Prix. Of course, in Austin. Marc Marquez crashed out of the lead. So we are about 4 minutes away from lights out for this 11-lap sprint. Marc Marquez firing away from pole position. His previous pole this year was also in front of his adoring Spanish public at the Circuito de Jerez Angel Nieto. And what a Sunday race we had there. What a showdown that was between Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia. What a showdown between those two it was here 3 years ago. That first win in 2021. A catalyst for future glory for Bagnaia. What a journey it has been since that win here 3 years ago. Now in the top 10 all-time winners list in MotoGP history. He is up there with the very best. Some of the most legendary and iconic names in the history of Grand Prix motorcycle racing. Then as the safety car, then the BMW peels away at the front of the grid. 5 points, the gap between Bagnaia and Martin in the championship. Marquez has slipped 83 adrift, 9 rounds to go, 83 points. The gap to a very informed Pecco Bagnaia. Does sound like a big ask to get himself back into contention, but anything can happen. There is the rider then, 4th on the grid, 2nd in the World Championship, 13 sprint wins so far for Jorge Martin. Here is your World Championship leader then, Pecco Bagnaia. Will he hit the front once again, as he so often has done so far this season? Just the 2nd front row start of the year then for Pedro Acosta, but on pole position, looking for his first sprint success. It's the master of MotorLand, Marc Marquez.